Good morning. Special good morning to the Minister and all our esteemed colleagues that are here today. My name is Richard Bourne, and I am the current chairman of an organization in Ireland called Agri Aware. And Agri Aware is, I suppose, encapsulates everything that we're doing here today in the sense that we communicate the value of agriculture to the general public. And that is something that is becoming a message that's ever more important in a changing world. And coming on the back of Hayden's talk earlier, it just reaffirms in my mind how difficult farming is becoming, how difficult the communication to our students, our children, the general public, our consumer. We've got all these strands to communicate to, and it is becoming an ever more difficult job to do that. But we have to influence the influencers, because if we don't influence the influencers, how are we ever going to be able to change things for the better? So, Agri Aware, our mission statement is to improve the image and understanding of farming and the agri-food industry among the general public. Our target audience is preschool students, primary, second, third, and the general public. So really it's everybody. And also farmers, because we as farmers, and I'm a farmer, I farm cattle, so I'm fully aware of the carbon issues, I'm fully aware of climate change. I also farm sheep, and I have quite a bit of tillage as well as forestry. But if we as farmers cannot be our own ambassadors to go out into the world and within our own communities, with our own, into our own countries, and globally as well, and to be able to identify the issues that need to be spoken about. But if we can't do that, who is going to do it for us? So it's very, very important that we as farmers can spread that word. So how did Agri Aware form? And there's no other organization that I'm aware of in the world that is independently funded that does the job that we do in Ireland. If you go back to the mid-1990s, we had a catastrophic event that happened, and it was called BSE, bovine spongiform encephalitis, commonly known as mad cow disease. And in Europe, it devastated meat consumption, and it had a profound impact on the way people viewed farmers. And that's still being felt today. So a number of leading organizations felt that the agricultural industry was suffering some very serious publicity damage, and nobody was standing up and speaking for the industry in an independent fashion. So we had an organization that represents farmers in Ireland called the IFA, and that's the Irish Farmers Association. We have 80,000 members within that organization, and they saw a need for somebody to be able to independently speak up for farming, for agriculture, for the agri-food sector, along with one of our biggest insurance companies in Ireland, FBD, which is Farm Business Development, Board Beer, who is our marketing body, and they ensure that when we have a trade delegation going to China, Board Beer would be one of the leading groups that would bring politicians together and be able to create new policy for trading. The Irish Farmers Journal, which is our largest agricultural newspaper, which is published weekly, and in a hugely important way through the media to be able to get information out to farmers and to the agri-food industry. And then lastly, Ornua, who is our representative for the dairy industry, they would have created the brand name Kerrygold, which is synonymous around the world. So these 5 large organizations came together, and they created this organization called Agri Aware to be able to communicate the value of agriculture to the general public. So we also are funded by 80 other patrons, some of them here, And I'm going to pick out one of them, and it's on the top line, and it's Dublin Zoo. And Dublin Zoo have 1.2 million visitors every year. It's a phenomenally well-run zoo in global terms. But 1.2 million visitors go into Dublin Zoo every year. And Agri Aware, in partnership with Dublin Zoo, have a small farm there. We have a milking cow, we have a beef cow, we may have calves, sheep, and we have an educational program that can work in conjunction with this visualization where people can actually see animals. And it's staggering in today's world how little people really understand about their food production. The most important thing that we do every single day is to eat. And the minister mentioned it earlier on. I mean, it's so basic and it's so simple, yet we somehow have failed to communicate this important message. But certainly Dublin Zoo would be a very big part of the way that we would communicate directly to the public. So I was asked to identify some of the challenges going forward, and my number one challenge coming on the back of Hayden's talk is climate change. Habitat destruction in Ireland, that is a serious problem that we're facing, and communicating how we're going to combat habitat destruction to the general public and students is a big part of our brief. Trade policies and equalization of production standards. Now that might seem like a little bit of a mouthful, but it's having an impact on what we produce, how I produce food, and what I'm producing going forward. And all of these things, again, need to be understood. And I put in technologies to the rescue because we could talk all day about the problems, but we need to identify the solutions. And it's the solutions at the end of the day that are going to move us forward. So briefly, I'll just talk a little bit about climate change. We've suffered some severe weather events in Ireland, and I'm sure here in this part of the world, you've probably experienced the same thing as well. We've had extreme cold, extreme drought, extreme wind, and prolonged periods of excessive rain. And we've never had a sort of combination within a 10-year period of all of those events together. And as producers, we're having to change what we're doing in some cases, certainly change how we're doing it. And we're currently facing into a winter now. It's your summer, but it's our winter, where we've got a significant fodder shortage for cattle throughout the country, and that's on the back of climate change. So we have to make some very important decisions there on how to combat that. But at the same time, what we need to do is we need to be talking to our school children about this and let them know that there are issues out there with the way that their food is produced, that it's not just straightforward. They don't just necessarily have to walk into a supermarket and pick whatever it is off the shelf. I met a man the other day who told me that he was educating a group of school children in Ireland, and those children thought that milk that came from a cow was white. Yes, we all know that. But some of the children actually thought that a brown cow produced chocolate milk. Extraordinary. But this is ignorance, and we need to be very aware that that ignorance is dangerous. Carbon emissions and sequestration. Again, this is something that Hayden talked about earlier. Communicating that to our children. The importance of carbon. What does carbon actually mean? If you pulled a 7 or 8-year-old child and you said, is carbon good? Is carbon bad? Where does carbon come from? Do they understand? They are the next generation of influencers. They're the next ministers, the next captains of industry. The next leaders are in school today. And we need to be very, very careful on how we influence them going forward. New diseases with these changes. Again, this is something that we're now facing. Diseases like blue tongue, which are coming in on small mosquito-like flies and affecting our cattle and affecting our sheep. Things that 10 years ago we never heard of. And we've now got to combat this and make sure that if those diseases do get into our livestock, that people don't become afraid to eat meat again or to drink milk. And that's what we saw with the BSE crisis. And if it wasn't handled very well early on, and it led to a 30% decline in meat consumption back in the 1990s. A 30% decline is massive. And nobody wants to go back to a situation where we've got something like that. So, and a lot of that was based on lack of information. People just didn't get the real story. Public perception. Are we doing enough? Certainly, I can only speak for Ireland. I don't think we're doing enough. We're doing a lot. Agri Aware has been in existence for 22 years now. It's an ongoing process that is just going to perpetuate for as long as we're around as a society. Habitat destruction, I'll just talk very little about habitat destruction. Changing our attitude to production. People cannot expect cheap food at prices that are so low that you have to question how did that animal, what sort of a life did it have, where did it live, what had to be cut down or moved to produce that low price commodity. Low food prices are very dangerous. Ensuring the future protection of global species. We have various different species in Ireland that are under pressure at the moment, most of them bird species. But a lot of initiatives have been brought in the last 10 or 15 years to protect those birds. And it's important that children in primary school, secondary school, that everybody understands that there is work taking place to counteract the damage that has been done in the past. Because again, we don't want to go on about the negativity and it's never going to get better. Of course it's going to get better. We're smart enough to make it better. Farming with our natural environment. Our natural environment is critical to all of us here, not only in this room, but to everybody in the world. And how we treat it is going to be how we're judged by these generations that we're educating today. So we're all in this together. Public perception, again, are we doing enough with all of this whole topic? And I would say we've got a lot of work to do. And we need to do it fast, but we need to do it in a smart and clever way. Trade politics and equalization of production standards. This is quite a big one at the moment, and it's one that people probably don't understand. Again, they go into the supermarket, they want to be able to buy cheap food. They want to buy food at the best possible price. They don't understand that in order to produce a high quality product, which is we as farmers do on a day-to-day basis, we produce some of the best food in the world. That has to be done in a sustainable way. It has to be done in a way that ensures that farmers get a decent price for their product, because otherwise they won't go on producing it. Trade tariffs can have a huge impact on how that unfolds and happens going forward. And certainly in Europe at the moment, we've got the whole Brexit negotiations that are taking place this week. So it's fraught with pitfalls, and there's all sorts of outcomes that could possibly happen as a result of Brexit. But I'm sure that farming will survive, as it always has done in the past. The farm that I farm on has been in production for 600 years. And we have records on the farm that go back 250 years. And one of the wonderful things to be able to look back through those records is that the land always produced. If it was producing cattle 200 years ago, sheep, and I can see the numbers of them. But it's a wonderful sort of, it grounds you a little bit to realize that the problems that we have today, they're not new. A lot of these problems are, yes, we've created some of them. But there was always problems with production and food consumption. And somehow we were able to get through them all. And I have no doubt that we'll be able to get through the current ones as well. Emerging markets and ideology. Ideology is a huge one. We've got a problem in Europe where people are turning away from meat. They feel that eating meat counterproductive to animal rights. It may be morally wrong for us to be farming animals. And this is a debate that we're having to gently counteract almost on a day-to-day basis. And the voice of those ideologues is getting louder and louder and more cohesive. And that's dangerous from the producer's point of view. And I'm not going to get into the yeas or nays of the debate, but you know where my feelings are. I'm a farmer. Also religion. Religion has changed the way that we produce certain meats. There is a greater demand for sheep meat in Europe because of the growing Muslim population. And again, this is something that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to predict over the years. And making sure, again, that all of this is communicated in a sensible fashion so that students and children and the general public understand the complexities of agriculture, farming, and food production. Feeding a population of 10 billion by 2050. This is absolutely staggering stuff. And I'll give you a little statistic. My father was born in Kenya in Africa in 1930. And the population of Kenya in 1930 was 2.4 million. Almost identical population to Ireland, because in 1930, the population of Ireland was 2.5 million. Today, the population in Ireland has approximately doubled, and we're 5 million people, nearly 90 years later, 80 years later. The population of Kenya is 57 million people. Now, that's a problem, and it's one that's not very easily overcome. And Hayden mentioned some of the solutions to creating more food. So we've got all these problems, and we need more food for more people. That's where we need a lot of technology and a lot of brains to be able to come into the back of it. And this is where I think we'll win at the end of the day. And again, communicating this to our students, to the future influencers, to the general public, to our consumers. And our consumers, like yours in Uruguay, our consumers are worldwide. Your consumers are all over the world too. So it's important that we don't just speak to ourselves, that we talk to the people that are consuming the food that we produce, and that they see what we're doing. We're heading in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. Genetics, I see huge improvement potential in genetics. Hayden mentioned earlier about certain breeds of cattle and sheep that produce naturally, just produce less carbon or less methane. Methane's 23 times more damaging as a greenhouse gas than carbon anyway, so if you can reduce methane production in livestock, that's incredible stuff. Who are the people that are going to do this? The people that are going to do this are in school today. These are the people that we need to be able to say, this is important, that you guys can fix the problems. You got the brains, you got the education. These are the problems. Now go out and find a solution for them. Smart farming. Smart farming, again, just using technology. Using less to produce more in a more sustainable fashion. It's not rocket science. And as a farmer myself, I can see where I am wasteful, and I can see where I could definitely make huge improvements without spending a whole hell of a lot of money. And it's all there in front of us. The research is there, the science is there. All we've got to do is put it into place and make it work. Application of science to ensure more sustainable production. Again, this ties in very much the same language, drone technology, ensuring that when we spread fertilizers, we're not excessively spreading fertilizers in some parts of the land and less in others. You can reduce your fertilizer output by 15% by just using drone technology, smart farming. Simple little things like that that are interesting to students. And if you start talking about science and technology, tech today lights up the eyes of any kid anywhere in the world because they love that. That's what makes them tick. It's clever, and it's part of the world that they grew up in. It's the world that they live in. Using less resources to produce more. Just common sense. Somebody once said, in real estate, if you're selling real estate, the most important thing, there's three things in real estate, and it's location, 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 right? So I would say that in our business, in agricultural awareness, it's education, education, education. That's where we've got to work on, and we've really got to get it right in the next few years. And I applaud the drive within your country in Uruguay to produce a body that is going to be an agricultural awareness body, and I think that's fundamentally fabulous, and I wish you every success with it. The key to success in our own organization, and I don't mind saying this, is our independence. And the only way we can function as an independent body is because of the support of those key organizations that I showed you earlier on, and their continued support, because it's an annual support. But they do see value in it, and those big agri-businesses can now say that they're influencing in a positive way their consumers, their communities, and it's a very positive message, and they can use it in many different ways with marketing, and it's all part of good governance. Corporate good governance is what the world is looking for today. And this kind of symbiotic relationship between an organization like Agri Aware and the corporate world represents good corporate governance. Farm to fork. We need to understand, as consumers, as farmers, as citizens of this great world, we all need to understand how our food is produced, who produces it, what happens to it between the time it's grown in the fields or in feedlots, what happens to it before it actually gets to our plate. Has it been changed? Has it been messed with? Is there proper traceability all the way through? And we need to demand that is the case. And our future consumers need to understand what a wonderful system is in place. And it is working, but it needs to be guided, steered, and improved upon on a continuous basis. So I will leave you at that. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to meeting some of you afterwards.